The screams pierced the dawn as Cordelia James ran through the forest, her chestnut hair wild and her boots splashing through puddles left by the night's rain. Accusations of witchcraft trailed behind her like smoke, but it wasn't dark magic that had brought the town's wrath down upon her. It was simply her knowledge of herbs and healing that small minds couldn't understand. The year was 1876, and in the small settlement of Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, science and superstition still waged their ancient war. Cordelia had been the town's unofficial healer for nearly 2 years now, since arriving from Boston at the age of 22 with her medical books and determination. But when the mayor's son died despite her efforts to save him from fever, whispers began. Whispers that grew into shouts. Shouts that became a mob. Now she ran, lungs burning, knowing that behind her torches were being lit, horses saddled. They would come for her with rope and righteousness. The forest floor began to slope upward as she climbed higher into the foothills. The dress she wore, once a respectable blue calico, was now torn at the hem and splattered with mud. Her apron, which normally held her collection of herbs and tinctures, was empty save for a small pouch of dried lavender and a silver locket containing a portrait of her late mother. The sound of hoofbeats in the distance made her heart stutter. They were coming faster than she'd anticipated. Cordelia veered left, scrambling up a steep embankment, her fingers digging into the soft earth. At the top, she paused to catch her breath, only to feel her ankle twist beneath her as the ground gave way. She tumbled down the other side of the ridge, landing in a heap at the bottom. Pain shot through her ankle, but there was no time to assess the damage. She forced herself upright, limping forward, using trees for support. The hoofbeats were growing louder, closing in from multiple directions. Tears blurred her vision as she realized there might be no escape. Then, through the trees ahead, she glimpsed something: a cabin. Smoke curled lazily from its stone chimney. It was her only hope. Cordelia half ran, half limped toward it, glancing over her shoulder as the sounds of pursuit grew ever closer. Just as she reached the small clearing where the cabin stood, the first of the riders broke through the tree line behind her. "There she is," a man's voice shouted. "The witch!" With the last of her strength, Cordelia stumbled to the cabin door and pounded her fist against it. "Help!" she cried, her voice cracking. "Please help me!" The door swung open so suddenly that she nearly fell forward into the cabin. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, a man with broad shoulders and a hat pulled low over his eyes. Without a word, he reached out, grabbed her arm, and pulled her inside, slamming the door behind them. "Hide," he said, his voice low and gravelly. He pointed to a ladder leading to a loft. "Up there." Now, Cordelia didn't hesitate. She climbed as quickly as her injured ankle would allow, disappearing into the shadows of the loft just as pounding erupted at the door. From her hiding place, she could see through the cracks between the wooden floorboards as the man below opened the door. "Isaac Ryder," came a familiar voice. "Sheriff Holloway from Redemption Creek. Didn't expect to find you up this way." "My land, my business," the man Isaac replied evenly. "What brings half the town to my doorstep at this hour?" "We're hunting a witch," another voice declared, Preacher Milton's, full of self-righteousness. "Cordelia James, the so-called healer. She's killed the mayor's boy with her devil's work." "That's so." Isaac's tone revealed nothing. "Saw her run this way," Sheriff Holloway said. "You seen her pass by?" There was a pause, and Cordelia held her breath, certain her thundering heart would give her away. "Ain't seen no one," Isaac finally replied. "Been tracking a mountain lion that's been after my horses, that's all. Mind if we look around?" The sheriff asked, though it didn't sound like a request. "Actually, I do mind," Isaac said firmly. "I've got traps set all around this property for that cat. Wouldn't want any of you getting caught in one. Besides, if she came this way, she'd have kept running north toward the high country." "You're wasting time here." There was muttering among the men outside, and Cordelia clutched the edge of the loft, preparing for the worst. But then Sheriff Holloway spoke again. All right, boys, Ryder's right. If she's heading for the mountains, we need to cut her off before nightfall. Let's ride. The sound of horses moving out filled the clearing, gradually fading as they headed north. Still, Cordelia didn't move, afraid it might be a trick. Minutes passed before Isaac called up to her. "They're gone. You can come down now." Cautiously, Cordelia descended the ladder, wincing as her injured ankle took her weight. When she reached the bottom, she got her first clear look at her rescuer. Isaac Ryder was taller than she'd thought, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a storm-dark sky. A scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into several days' worth of beard. He wore simple clothes, a faded blue shirt, worn denim pants, and scuffed boots. No gun belt, she noted with surprise. "Thank you," she said, suddenly aware of how she must appear wild-haired, mud-splattered, and desperate. "You're the healer?" he asked, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Yes," she answered, lifting her chin slightly. "Not a witch." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, figured as much. Those folks down in Redemption Creek never could tell the difference between healing and hexing. He gestured to a rough-hewn chair by the fire. "Sit. Let me look at that ankle." Cordelia hesitated. "I can tend to it myself." "I'm sure you can," he replied, "but I'm guessing you don't have any of your supplies with you, and I do." Reluctantly, she sat, extending her injured foot as he knelt before her. His hands were unexpectedly gentle as he removed her boot and examined her ankle. "Sprain, not a break," he pronounced. "Still, you won't be running anywhere for a few days." He rose and retrieved a small wooden box from a shelf, removing bandages and a jar of salve. "Are you a doctor?" she asked, surprised by his knowledge. Isaac shook his head. "Army medic, during the war." He didn't specify which side, and Cordelia didn't ask. The war had ended 11 years ago, but its wounds still ran deep across the nation. As he worked, wrapping her ankle with practiced efficiency, Cordelia took in her surroundings. The cabin was small but tidy. A bed stood against one wall, a table and chairs in the center, and a stone fireplace dominated the opposite wall. Books lined a shelf more than she would have expected, and herbs hung drying from the rafters. It was the home of someone who valued solitude but not isolation from knowledge. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. Isaac finished securing the bandage before answering. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted for something you didn't do." Before she could ask what he meant, he stood and moved to the fireplace, adding a log to the flames. "You're welcome to stay until your ankle heals," he said, his back to her. "By then, maybe they'll have cooled down in town." Cordelia shook her head. "They won't. Not after the mayor's son. They need someone to blame." "Then you'll need somewhere else to go," Isaac said matter-of-factly. "Denver, maybe, or California." The reality of her situation hit Cordelia fully then. She was truly homeless now, everything she owned abandoned in her small room above the general store in town. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She would not break, not here in front of this stranger who had already seen her at her most vulnerable. "I'll manage," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I always have." Isaac turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm sure you will, but for now, rest. You're safe here." Those simple words, "you're safe here," nearly undid her. When was the last time she had truly felt safe? Not in Redemption Creek, where her status as an unmarried woman practicing medicine had always marked her as an outsider. Not even in Boston, where her father's gambling debts had forced her to flee west. "Thank you, Mr. Ryder," she said formally, trying to maintain some dignity despite her bedraggled appearance. "Isaac," he corrected. "Just Isaac." "Cordelia," she offered in return, though he already knew her name from the posse. He nodded once, then moved to the door. "I need to check my traps. There really is a mountain lion about. There's stew in the pot if you're hungry. I won't be long." After he left, Cordelia allowed herself a moment of complete collapse, her face in her hands as she processed the morning's events. But only a moment. She had survived too much to be undone now. Rising carefully, she made her way to the small mirror hanging near the door and assessed her appearance. Her face was smudged with dirt, a scratch running along one cheekbone. Her once neat hair had come loose from its pins and hung in tangles past her shoulders. She looked wild, uncivilized, perhaps even like the witch they accused her of being. The thought almost made her laugh. Using water from a basin near the washstand, she cleaned her face and hands, then did her best to tame her hair, repinning it as neatly as possible. She couldn't do much about her dress, but she removed her torn apron and folded it carefully, setting it aside. True to his word, Isaac returned within the hour, carrying a rabbit he'd caught in one of his traps. If he noticed her improved appearance, he made no comment, simply nodding as he set about preparing the animal for cooking. "How long have you lived up here?" Cordelia asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. 5 years, he answered, his knife moving deftly. "Since the war, I didn't much care for crowds. You fought for the Union," she ventured, his hands paused briefly. "Yes. Though sometimes I wonder if any side truly won that war." It was a remarkably philosophical statement from a man who seemed determined to present himself as nothing more than a mountain hermit. Cordelia's curiosity about him deepened. "And before the war?" Isaac glanced up at her, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "You ask a lot of questions for someone running from a lynch mob." Cordelia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I apologize. It's not my place to pry." "I didn't say I minded," he replied, returning to his task. "I was a rancher's son in Colorado, raised horses, thought I'd go back to it after the war, but—" He shrugged. "Things change. Things change," such a simple phrase for what must have been a complex journey. "What about you?" he asked, turning the tables. "How does a Boston lady end up playing doctor in a Wyoming backwater?" Cordelia stiffened at his tone. "I wasn't playing doctor. My father was a physician. I assisted him from the time I was 12 years old. I've read every medical text he owned. I've delivered babies, set bones, and treated more illnesses than I can count." Isaac held up a hand in surrender. "Poor choice of words, I meant no offense." She sighed, her anger deflating. "No, I'm sorry, it's just... I've spent so long defending my knowledge that sometimes I forget not everyone questions it." "Knowledge is knowledge," he said simply. "Don't see why it matters if it comes from a man or a woman, so long as it works." He added the rabbit to the pot simmering over the fire, along with some wild onions and herbs. "You didn't answer my question, though. Why Wyoming?" Cordelia hesitated. She rarely spoke of her past, but something about this quiet man and his isolated cabin made her want to share the truth. "My father died 3 years ago. He left nothing but debts, gambling debts, mostly. Men came looking for payment." She twisted the fabric of her skirt between her fingers. "One of them offered to forgive the debt in exchange for marriage." Isaac's expression darkened. "You ran." "I ran," she confirmed. "I had a second cousin in Cheyenne who offered me a place to stay. I worked there for a time, but when I heard Redemption Creek needed someone with medical knowledge." She trailed off, the irony of the town's name not lost on her. "And now you're running again," Isaac observed. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "Though I'm not sure where to this time." Isaac stirred the pot thoughtfully. "You could stay here a while, longer than just until your ankle heals, I mean." Cordelia looked up, startled. "Here, with you." He met her gaze steadily. "I've got the space, and truth be told, I could use a healer nearby, nearest doctor's 3 days' ride." "People would talk," she said automatically, then almost laughed at herself. What did it matter what people said about her now? She was already branded a witch. Isaac seemed to read her thoughts. "Let them talk. They already think I'm half mad living up here alone." It was tempting, more tempting than it should have been. A safe place, away from accusations and expectations. But Cordelia had learned long ago not to trust easy solutions. "Why would you offer such a thing to a stranger?" she asked cautiously. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, adding a few more herbs to the stew before answering. "Because you remind me of someone who also had knowledge that scared people. Someone who wasn't protected when she should have been." There was history there, perhaps even pain, but Cordelia didn't press. Instead, she said, "I'll consider it, thank you." They ate in companionable silence as dusk settled around the cabin. After the meal, Isaac insisted she take the bed while he made a pallet near the fire. Despite her protests, he was unmovable on this point. "I've slept on worse," he assured her. "Much worse." Exhaustion soon overcame Cordelia's sense of propriety, and she found herself lying in Isaac's bed, staring up at the wooden ceiling. The sheets smelled of pine and something uniquely male, not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. Outside, an owl hooted, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf answered. These were not the sounds of Boston, nor even of Redemption Creek. These were the sounds of true wilderness. For the first time all day, Cordelia felt the full weight of her tears pressing behind her eyes. She had lost everything again. Her home, her few possessions, the life she had carefully built. And for what? Because she couldn't save one child from a fever that would have taken him no matter who tended him, she turned her face into the pillow, muffling her sobs. She didn't want Isaac to hear, didn't want to appear any weaker than she already had. But the tears came regardless, washing away the last of her composure. She wasn't sure how long she cried before she felt a hesitant touch on her shoulder. Isaac stood beside the bed, concern etched on his features in the dim firelight. "I'm sorry," she whispered, mortified. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," he said. "I was still awake." He awkwardly patted her shoulder. "It's all right to cry, you know, after what you've been through." Cordelia struggled to regain her composure. I'm not normally human," he suggested with a gentle smile. "Everyone breaks sometimes, Cordelia, even healers." The simple understanding in those words broke through the last of her defenses. She cried in earnest then, not caring that this man she barely knew was witness to her breakdown. And to her surprise, he sat on the edge of the bed and simply held her hand until the storm passed. "Better?" he asked when her tears finally subsided. She nodded, embarrassed but somehow lighter. "Thank you." He squeezed her hand once before releasing it. "Get some sleep. Things often look clearer in the morning." As he moved back to his pallet by the fire, Cordelia called softly. "Isaac," he turned, his face half in shadow. "Yes, I think I will stay. For a while at least." In the firelight, she saw the slight curve of his lips. "Good," he said simply, and settled back down to sleep. Cordelia closed her eyes, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she slept without fear. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong. Cordelia woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, wincing as her ankle protested the sudden movement. Isaac was already up, she realized, the smell of coffee and something baking filling the cabin. She smoothed her hair as best she could and adjusted her rumpled dress before making her way carefully down from the bed. "Good morning," Isaac greeted her, glancing up from where he tended a cast-iron skillet over the fire. "How's the ankle?" "Sore," she admitted, "but better than yesterday." He nodded, seemingly pleased with her honest assessment. "Good. I've made cornbread, not as good as my mother's, but it'll do." Cordelia was struck by the domesticity of the scene, this solitary man making breakfast in his isolated cabin. It seemed at odds with the intensity she had sensed in him yesterday. "Thank you," she said, taking a seat at the small table. "And thank you again for helping me, for everything." Isaac shrugged as if it were nothing, though they both knew it wasn't. He could have turned her over to the posse, could have washed his hands of her problems entirely. Instead, he had offered shelter, protection, and now a place to stay. "If you're going to be here a while," he said, setting a plate of cornbread and a cup of coffee before her, "we should lay some ground rules." Cordelia tensed slightly. Here it was the catch she had been waiting for. "What kind of rules?" she asked cautiously. "Nothing too demanding," he assured her, taking the seat across from her. "I'm gone most days, checking traps or hunting. The cabin is yours to use as you see fit. There's a garden out back that could use tending if you're so inclined." It all seemed reasonable enough. And in return, Isaac considered her over the rim of his coffee cup. "In return, you keep to yourself when strangers come by. There are trappers and hunters in these mountains who stop here occasionally to trade. Better if they don't know I've got company, Cordelia understood immediately. You're protecting me. Protecting us both, he corrected. I've worked hard to build a life away from prying eyes and wagging tongues. I'd like to keep it that way. She nodded slowly. I understand. Is there anything else? Just one thing, he said, his expression growing more serious. No lies between us. I don't need to know every detail of your past, and you don't need to know mine, but what we do share should be the truth. It was a simple request, but one that carried weight. Cordelia had spent so much of her life guarding her words, measuring what to reveal and what to hide. The prospect of complete honesty, even within limits, was both liberating and terrifying. I can agree to that, she said finally. No lies. Isaac nodded once, satisfied. Then I believe we'll get along just fine. After breakfast, he showed her around the cabin and the surrounding area. Despite his injured ankle, she insisted on seeing the garden, which was larger than she'd expected. Rows of vegetables and herbs, some of which she recognized as medicinal. You grow medicine, she observed, kneeling to examine a plant she knew to be good for reducing fever. Some, he acknowledged. What I couldn't hunt or grow, I'd have to ride to town for. Seemed more practical to grow what I could. Practical, yes, but also thoughtful. Cordelia was beginning to suspect there was much more to Isaac Ryder than the gruff exterior he presented to the world. As the days passed, they settled into an unexpected rhythm. Isaac would leave early, checking his traps or hunting, while Cordelia tended the garden and kept the cabin in order. Her ankle improved steadily, and with it, her spirits. There was something deeply satisfying about the simplicity of this life, rising with the sun, working with her hands, falling asleep to the sound of the wind in the pines. At night, they would eat together and sometimes talk. Isaac, she discovered, was well-read despite his isolation. He had books on everything from philosophy to botany, and they often discussed what they had read. He never asked why she had chosen medicine, and she never asked why he had chosen solitude. Some boundaries, it seemed, they both respected. A week into her stay, Cordelia was in the garden harvesting beans when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Remembering Isaac's warning, she quickly gathered her basket and retreated to the cabin, closing the door behind her. Through the small window, she watched as two riders approached, rough-looking men with rifles slung across their saddles. Isaac emerged from the tree line just as they dismounted. From her hiding place, Cordelia could hear their conversation. Ryder, the taller of the men, greeted him. Been a while, Dawson, Isaac replied neutrally. Jenkins, what brings you up this way? The man called Dawson spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the ground. Looking for a woman, which they're saying down in Redemption Creek killed the mayor's boy. Cordelia's heart began to pound. So they were still looking for her. Heard about that, Isaac said, his voice betraying nothing. Nasty business. Sheriff's offering a reward now, the other man, Jenkins, added. $50 for information leading to her capture, $100 if we bring her in alive. That's so. Isaac leaned against the fence post, seemingly unconcerned. Seems like a lot of trouble for one woman. Dawson's eyes narrowed. Mayor says she's dangerous, got powers, can make a man's heart stop with just a look. To Cordelia's surprise, Isaac laughed, a genuine sound of amusement she had rarely heard from him. And you believe that horseshit? The men shifted uncomfortably. Don't matter what we believe, Jenkins said defensively. Money's real enough. Well, I haven't seen any witch, Isaac said firmly. Just a mountain lion that's been after my horses. That's what I'm hunting. The men looked disappointed but not suspicious. If you do see anything, Dawson said. Ryder came through couple days back, said he spotted a woman heading toward the Indian Territory. Might be her. I'll keep an eye out, Isaac promised, though Cordelia could hear the lie in his voice. You boys want coffee before you head back down, they declined, mounting up again. As they rode away, Dawson called back, Be careful, Ryder, they say she can change her appearance. Might look like someone you know. Isaac raised a hand in acknowledgement but said nothing more. Once the riders were out of sight, he came to the cabin, opening the door to find Cordelia standing just inside, her face pale. "They're still looking," she said, stating the obvious. "They won't find you here," he assured her. "No one comes up this far unless I invite them." "But what if someone does?" she pressed. "What if they search the cabin?" Isaac's expression hardened. "Then I'll handle it." Something in his tone made Cordelia shiver. There was steel beneath his quiet demeanor, a reminder that this man had fought in a war, had seen things she could only imagine. "I don't want you risking yourself for me," she said softly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, his storm-gray eyes holding hers. "I made my choice when I pulled you inside that first day, Cordelia. I'm not the kind of man who goes back on his word." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. For the first time, she wondered if there might be more than just charity behind his offer of shelter. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. "Thank you," she said simply, not knowing what else to say. He nodded once, then headed back outside. "I'll be checking the western traps, won't be back until sunset." As promised, he returned at dusk, carrying a brace of rabbits. Cordelia had spent the afternoon making bread, a skill she had learned from necessity after her father's death, and the cabin was filled with its warm scent. "Smells good," Isaac commented as he set about cleaning his catch. "It's the least I can do," she replied, "given all you've done for me." He glanced up, a half-smile touching his lips. "You don't owe me anything, Cordelia." "Everyone owes something to someone," she said quietly, Isaac's hands stilled. "Is that what you think, that you're building a debt here?" "No," she said quickly. "I didn't mean, because if that's what's worrying you, don't let it," he interrupted. "I didn't help you expecting anything in return." The sincerity in his voice touched her. "I know that, I'm not used to kindness without conditions." Isaac resumed his work, silent for a long moment before saying, "Neither am I." The simple admission created a new understanding between them. That night, as they ate by firelight, the silence was comfortable, companionable. Cordelia found herself studying Isaac when he wasn't looking, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands moved with such precision, the occasional smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. She was attracted to him, she realized with a start. This quiet, complex man with his books and his solitude had begun to occupy her thoughts in ways that went beyond gratitude. It was inappropriate, of course. She was dependent on him for shelter and protection. Any feelings beyond friendship would complicate matters immensely. And yet, as the days turned to weeks, Cordelia found those feelings growing stronger. They worked side by side in the garden, their hands occasionally brushing. They discussed books and ideas, discovering shared interests and respectfully debating differences. In the evenings, Isaac would sometimes play a harmonica, old songs from before the war that made something ache in Cordelia's chest. It was a kind of intimacy she had never experienced before, built not on social obligations or family ties, but on choice and mutual respect. And perhaps, though she hardly dared think it, something more. The first frost came early that year, painting the ground white one September morning. Cordelia awoke to find Isaac already gone, a note on the table saying he'd gone to check his traplines and would return by midday. The cabin was chilly, and she set about building up the fire, grateful for the stack of wood Isaac had prepared. As she worked, she heard a sound outside, not horses this time, but a single set of footsteps crunching through the frost-covered grass. Cordelia froze, her heart racing. It wasn't Isaac, he wouldn't be back so soon. Quickly, she moved to the window, peering cautiously outside. A woman stood in the clearing, an older woman with silver-streaked dark hair, wrapped in a colorful shawl. She wasn't from Redemption Creek. Cordelia would have recognized her. A trapper's wife, perhaps, or a traveler. The woman approached the cabin directly, showing none of the caution of someone with ill intent. After a moment's hesitation, Cordelia opened the door. "Good morning," she said, trying to sound calm and assured, as if she belonged there. "Can I help you?" The woman studied her with dark, intelligent eyes. "I was looking for Isaac Ryder. I'm Sarah Two Rivers." The name meant nothing to Cordelia. "Mr. Ryder isn't here at the moment, he's checking his traps." "And you are?" the woman asked, her head tilting slightly. Cordelia hesitated. Should she give her real name? But Isaac had said no lies between them, and though this woman was a stranger, dishonesty felt wrong somehow. "Cordelia James," she admitted. "I'm staying with Mr. Ryder for a time." Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly, but she made no comment on this arrangement. "I've brought herbs for Isaac," she said instead, holding up a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "And news." Cordelia stepped back from the doorway. "Please come in, he should return by midday." The woman entered, removing her shawl and draping it over one arm. Now Cordelia could see that she was Native American, perhaps in her 50s, with the straight back and proud bearing of someone who had endured much and survived it all. "You're the witch," Sarah said suddenly, her dark eyes fixing on Cordelia's face. Cordelia stiffened. "I'm a healer." "Not a witch." To her surprise, Sarah smiled a warm, genuine smile that transformed her serious face. "Of course you are, so am I, to some that makes us witches," understanding dawned. "You're a medicine woman." Sarah nodded, seating herself by the fire as if she were a frequent visitor to the cabin. "I've known Isaac Ryder for 4 winters now. He respects the old ways, the healing ways. Not many white men do." Cordelia sat across from her, intrigued by this woman who seemed so at ease in Isaac's home. "How did you meet him?" "He was sick. Very sick, hunting in a snowstorm, fell through ice. My son found him, brought him to our camp." Sarah's eyes grew distant with memory. "He was more dead than alive. I used the old medicines, the ones my grandmother taught me. He lived." "And now you bring him herbs," Cordelia concluded, "and he brings us meat, helps my son with hunting. A fair trade." Sarah studied Cordelia closely. "But you, the whole territory is looking for you. They say you killed with magic." "I tried to save a child with medicine," Cordelia corrected. "I failed, and now they call me witch." Sarah nodded slowly. "It is an old story. When women have knowledge, men often call it witchcraft." She leaned forward. "But you are safe here. Isaac would not let harm come to you." There was something in the way she said it, a certainty that went beyond mere observation. "You seem very sure of that." "I know his heart," Sarah said simply. "It was broken once. I think perhaps it is healing now." Before Cordelia could ask what she meant, the door opened and Isaac entered, stamping frost from his boots. He stopped short at the sight of Sarah, then broke into a rare, full smile. "Sarah," he greeted her, crossing to take her outstretched hands. "It's good to see you." "And you, my friend," she replied warmly. "I see you have found a healer of your own." Isaac's eyes flicked to Cordelia, something unreadable passing through them. "She needed refuge, I had space." Sarah made a sound that might have been disbelief. "Is that what you call it, space?" She shook her head, amusement playing about her lips. "I have brought you the herbs you asked for and news from the valley." Isaac's expression sobered. "What news?" "The search for the witch continues," Sarah reported. "The mayor has increased the reward. And there is talk of bringing in hunters from Denver, men who specialize in tracking." Cordelia felt the blood drain from her face. Professional trackers would not be so easily misdirected as the local men had been. Isaac's jaw tightened. "When?" "Soon, before the first heavy snow." Sarah glanced at Cordelia. "She is not safe here much longer." "I know," Isaac said grimly. "I've been thinking about that." He looked at Cordelia. "We may need to move further into the mountains." "We," Cordelia repeated, startled. "But this is your home." "It's just a cabin," he said dismissively. "I can build another." Sarah watched this exchange with knowing eyes. "Or," she suggested, "she could come to our winter camp. No white man would find her there." Isaac considered this, his expression torn. "That might be safer," he admitted reluctantly. The thought of leaving the cabin, of leaving Isaac, filled Cordelia with an unexpected sadness. These past weeks had been some of the most peaceful of her life, despite the circumstances that had brought her here. "I don't want to impose on your people," she said to Sarah. "Or to separate you from your home," she added to Isaac. Sarah rose, gathering her shawl. "Think on it, both of you. I will return in 3 days for your answer." She pressed the bundle of herbs into Isaac's hands. Use these for the cough that comes in winter. And this," she added, handing him a smaller packet, "is for courage the kind that makes a man speak what is in his heart." With that cryptic statement, she nodded to Cordelia and departed, leaving a charged silence in her wake. "She seems to know you well," Cordelia observed after a moment. Isaac set the herbs aside, not meeting her eyes. "She saved my life once. She told me." Cordelia hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering her. "What did she mean about your heart being broken?" Isaac stiffened. "Sarah talks too much." "You don't have to tell me," Cordelia said quickly. My wife," he interrupted, his voice rough. "During the war, she was accused of being a Confederate sympathizer because she treated wounded soldiers from both sides. A mob came in the night." He drew a deep breath. "I was away fighting. By the time I returned, they had already hanged her." The horror of it stole Cordelia's breath. "Isaac, I'm so sorry." "It was a long time ago," he said, though his eyes said otherwise. Suddenly, his reaction to her plight made perfect sense. It wasn't just charity or kindness that had prompted him to shelter her, it was recognition. He had seen in her situation an echo of his own tragic past. "That's why you helped me," she said softly. "Because no one helped her." Isaac finally looked at her, pain and something else warring in his gaze. "At first, yes, but now." "Now," she prompted. When he fell silent, he shook his head, moving toward the door. "I need to check the eastern traps before the frost melts." And he was gone, leaving Cordelia with more questions than answers. That night, Isaac returned later than usual, his manner distant. They ate in silence, the easy companionship of previous weeks temporarily suspended. Cordelia wanted to bridge the gap but didn't know how. She had clearly touched on a wound that had never fully healed. As she prepared for bed, Isaac spoke abruptly from his place by the fire. "You should go with Sarah, to her winter camp." Cordelia turned to face him, surprised by the sudden declaration. "You want me to leave?" "I want you to be safe," he corrected. "And Sarah's right. If they bring in professional trackers, this cabin won't stay hidden for long." Logic told her he was right. The smart choice would be to accept Sarah's offer, to disappear among her people until the hunt for the witch had ended. But the thought of leaving Isaac, of not seeing him each day, created an ache in her chest she couldn't ignore. "What about you?" she asked. "Would you come too?" He shook his head. "Sarah's people tolerate me because I once saved her son during a hunt, but I'm still a white man. My presence for more than a few days would create tension." "Then I'll stay here," Cordelia decided. "We can face whatever comes together." Isaac rose from his seat, crossing to stand before her. "Don't be foolish," he said, though there was no anger in his voice. "If they find you here, they'll hang you. I won't let that happen." "And I won't let you face danger alone because of me," she countered. They stood at an impasse, neither willing to yield. In the firelight, Isaac's face was all plains and shadows, his eyes dark with emotion. Cordelia was suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth radiating from his body, of the way his gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. "Why do you care what happens to me?" he asked, his voice low. It was the question she had been avoiding asking herself. Why did she care so deeply about this solitary man's welfare? Why did the thought of leaving him create such distress? "Because," she began, then faltered, searching for words that wouldn't reveal too much. "Because you've become important to me." It was an inadequate expression of the feelings that had grown within her over these weeks of shared meals and conversations, of working side by side and existing in a harmony she had never known before. Isaac's expression softened, and he lifted a hand to brush a strand of hair from her face. The touch, gentle as it was, sent a shiver through her. "And you to me," he admitted quietly. "More than I expected, more than I thought possible after everything." The confession hung in the air between them, changing everything and nothing at once. They were still a woman running from false accusations and a man haunted by his past. Their situation was still precarious, their future uncertain. And yet, in acknowledging what had grown between them, they had crossed a threshold. "Isaac," Cordelia whispered, not sure what she wanted to say, only knowing she needed to say something to bridge the final distance between them. But before she could find the words, he stepped back, breaking the moment. "We should sleep. Tomorrow we'll decide what to do." Disappointment washed through her, but she nodded, retreating to the bed while he returned to his pallet by the fire. As she lay in the darkness, listening to the crackle of the flames and the soft sounds of Isaac's breathing, Cordelia wondered if they had missed their chance, if fear or propriety or the ghosts of the past would always stand between them. Morning brought a heavy mist that clung to the trees surrounding the cabin, turning the world ghostly and indistinct. Cordelia rose early, finding the cabin empty. Isaac's rifle was gone from its place by the door, suggesting he had gone hunting at dawn. She set about her usual tasks, building up the fire, preparing breakfast, tidying the small space. These simple chores had become a comfort over the weeks, a routine that grounded her in this new life. But today, they felt tinged with melancholy. If she were to leave with Sarah in 2 days' time, these quiet mornings in the cabin might be nothing more than memory. By midday, Isaac had not returned. Cordelia tried not to worry. He often spent hours in the forest, but something felt different about this absence. A sense of foreboding crept over her as the hours passed. She found herself checking the window repeatedly, straining to hear the sound of his footsteps. When the mist finally cleared in late afternoon, Cordelia could bear the waiting no longer. Despite her better judgment, she decided to look for him. She knew the path he usually took to his western traps. He had shown her once, pointing out landmarks she could use to navigate if she ever needed to find him. Wrapping herself in a shawl Isaac had given her a gift from Sarah's people, he'd said Cordelia set out, following the narrow trail that wound through the pines. The forest was quiet, the only sounds the occasional call of a bird and the soft whisper of wind through the branches. She had walked for perhaps 20 minutes when she heard a groan of pain, human and unmistakable. Heart racing, she quickened her pace, following the sound off the path and down a slight incline. There, half hidden among fallen leaves, lay Isaac. His leg was caught in what appeared to be a trap, not one of his own, but a larger, more brutal device with wicked metal teeth. Blood had soaked through his pant leg, and his face was gray with pain and what might have been blood loss. "Isaac," Cordelia cried, rushing to his side. His eyes flickered open, focusing on her with difficulty. "Cordelia, what are you doing here?" "Looking for you," she said, already examining the trap that held him. It was a bear trap, she realized, much larger and more powerful than the smaller traps Isaac used for rabbits and mink. "How long have you been here?" "Since morning," he said through gritted teeth. "Stepped right into it like a greenhorn, couldn't reach my knife to pry it open." The trap's jaws had sunk deep into his calf, the wound still slowly seeping blood despite what appeared to be hours of compression. Cordelia's medical training took over, assessing the damage with clinical detachment. "I need to open this trap," she said, "but first, I'm going to tie something above the wound to slow the bleeding when I release it." Isaac nodded, his face set in lines of pain. Cordelia tore a strip from her petticoat and wrapped it tightly around his leg above the trap, creating a rudimentary tourniquet. Then, bracing herself, she placed her hands on the spring mechanism of the trap. "This will hurt," she warned him. "Just do it," he grunted. Mustering all her strength, Cordelia pressed down on the springs, forcing the jaws of the trap to open just enough for Isaac to pull his injured leg free. He made no sound beyond a sharp intake of breath, but sweat beaded on his forehead from the effort. Once his leg was clear, Cordelia let the trap snap shut again and turned her full attention to the wound. It was deep, the metal teeth having torn through muscle, but mercifully appeared to have missed the major blood vessels. Still, infection was a serious risk, and Isaac had already lost a considerable amount of blood. "We need to get you back to the cabin," she said, loosening the tourniquet slightly. "Can you stand if I help you?" Isaac grimaced. "Have to, don't I?" With Cordelia's support, he managed to get to his feet, keeping his weight off the injured leg. Progress was slow and painful, Isaac leaning heavily on Cordelia as they made their way back up to the path. By the time they reached the cabin, both were exhausted, and Isaac's face had taken on an alarming pallor. Cordelia helped him to the bed, then quickly gathered what she would need: clean cloths, water, the medicinal herbs she had harvested from the garden, and a bottle of whiskey Isaac kept for trading. She cut away the blood-soaked fabric of his pant leg to better access the wound. "This needs to be cleaned thoroughly," she told him, uncorking the whiskey. "It's going to burn." Isaac's lips twisted in what might have been an attempt at a smile. "Not the first time I've had whiskey poured on a wound. Drink some first," she suggested, handing him the bottle. "It might help with the pain." He took a long swallow before handing it back. Cordelia then poured a liberal amount over the wound. Isaac hissed but remained otherwise silent as she worked, cleaning the torn flesh as gently as she could while ensuring no dirt or debris remained. "Who set that trap?" she asked as she prepared a poultice of herbs. "You said it wasn't one of yours." "No," Isaac confirmed, his voice tight. "Bigger than anything I'd use. Probably trappers from the valley hunting bear out of season." Cordelia frowned as she applied the poultice, then began wrapping the wound with clean cloth. "It was set right on the path. That's dangerous." "And illegal," Isaac added grimly, "but there's no law up here except what a man makes for himself." Once the wound was bandaged, Cordelia helped Isaac drink some water, then insisted he rest. He was already showing signs of fever, an expected response to such an injury, but still concerning. "Don't leave me," he murmured as his eyes began to drift closed, the combination of exhaustion, pain, and whiskey pulling him toward sleep. "I won't," she promised, settling herself on the edge of the bed and taking his hand in hers. "I'm right here." As night fell, Isaac's fever rose. Cordelia bathed his face with cool water and prepared teas from Sarah's herbs, coaxing him to drink whenever he was lucid enough. Between these moments of clarity, he drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes mumbling words she couldn't understand, sometimes calling out names his wife's, perhaps, or comrades from the war. In the darkest hours before dawn, when the fire had burned low and the cabin was lit only by a single candle, Isaac's fever peaked. He thrashed against the bed covers, his skin burning to the touch despite Cordelia's efforts to cool him. "Elizabeth," he called, his voice raw with anguish. "Run." "They're coming," Cordelia's heart ached, knowing he was reliving the night his wife had died. "SHH," she soothed, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "It's all right, Isaac, you're safe." His eyes opened, but they were glassy with fever, seeing something or someone who wasn't there. "I couldn't save her," he whispered brokenly. "I wasn't there. It wasn't your fault," Cordelia told him, though she knew he probably couldn't hear her. "You couldn't have known." "But I should have," he insisted, grabbing her hand with surprising strength. "I should have protected her." "Like I'll protect you." His gaze focused briefly, recognition flaring. "Cordelia," "Yes," she said, relief washing through her. "It's me, I'm here." "Don't go," he pleaded, his grip tightening. "Not to Sarah's people, stay with me." The raw emotion in his voice brought tears to her eyes. "I won't go," she promised, knowing it might not be a promise she could keep, but unable to deny him in this moment of vulnerability. "I'm staying right here." He seemed to relax at her words, his grip loosening as he drifted back into uneasy sleep. Cordelia continued her vigil, applying fresh poultices to his wound and cooling his fevered skin, praying that his strong constitution would see him through this crisis. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, Isaac's fever finally broke. Cordelia, exhausted from her night-long watch, nearly wept with relief when she felt his forehead and found it cool to the touch. His breathing had steadied, and some color had returned to his face. She dozed then, still seated beside the bed, her head resting on the edge of the mattress near his hand. It was the sound of her name that woke her, Cordelia. She lifted her head to find Isaac awake and lucid, watching her with those storm-gray eyes that revealed so much while trying to hide everything. "You're awake," she said unnecessarily, straightening. How do you feel?" "Like I stepped in a bear trap," he replied dryly, a hint of his usual humor returning. "Did that actually happen, or did I dream it?" "It happened," she confirmed. "Do you remember me finding you?" He nodded slowly. "Most of it, getting back here, is a bit of a blur." He glanced down at his bandaged leg. "You saved me." "I treated your wound," she corrected. "You're not saved yet. The risk of infection is still high." Isaac's gaze softened. "Always the healer." "It's what I am," she said simply. "It's part of who you are," he agreed, "but not all." He hesitated, then asked, "Did I say anything?" While I was feverish, Cordelia considered lying to spare him embarrassment, but remembered their agreement: no lies between them. "You called for Elizabeth," she said gently. "Your wife." Pain flashed across his features. "Yes, she. It was her name I saw last in my mind before the fever took hold. I'm sorry." "Don't be," Cordelia assured him. "You loved her. That's nothing to apologize for." Isaac studied her face for a long moment. "I did love her very much. For a long time I thought I'd never feel that way again. Didn't want to." He took a deep breath. "But then you came running to my door." Cordelia's heart skipped a beat. "Isaac, let me finish," he interrupted. "I need to say this while I still have the courage, or maybe while I can blame it on fever if you don't feel the same." He reached for her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "When I pulled you inside that first day, I thought I was just saving a stranger from a mob, but these weeks with you, they've woken something in me I thought was long dead." The words she had longed to hear, yet feared might never come. Cordelia found herself speechless, overwhelmed by the emotion evident in Isaac's face and voice. "I understand if you don't feel the same," he continued when she didn't respond. "I'm not much of a catch, a scarred war veteran living alone in the mountains. But I wanted you to know that whatever happens, whether you go to Sarah's people or somewhere else entirely, you've given me back something I thought was lost forever." Cordelia finally found her voice. "And what is that?" A smile touched his lips, small but genuine. "Hope." In that moment, all her uncertainties and fears seemed insignificant compared to the truth of her feelings for this man. She leaned forward, cupping his face in her hands, and kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, mindful of his weakened state, but it conveyed everything she couldn't yet put into words: her gratitude, her admiration, and yes, her love. When she pulled back, Isaac's eyes were wide with surprise and dawning joy. "I take it you feel the same?" he asked, a hint of his dry humor returning. Cordelia laughed softly. "Yes, Isaac, I feel the same." He tugged her hand, drawing her down to sit beside him on the bed. "Then stay," he said. "Not just because it's safer here than running again, but because I want you to. Because we could build something here together." The offer was everything she hadn't dared hope for: a home, a future, someone to share it with, but reality couldn't be ignored entirely. "The people hunting me won't give up," she reminded him. "As long as they believe I'm a witch who killed the mayor's son, they'll keep looking." Isaac's expression grew thoughtful. "Then perhaps it's time they learn the truth." "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about this since before the trap," he explained. "There's a newspaper in Laramie run by a man I served with in the war. He's always looking for stories that expose corruption or injustice. If we could get him to print the truth about what happened with the mayor's son—" "Who would believe it?" Cordelia interrupted. "It would be my word against the mayor's." "Not just yours," Isaac pointed out. "There must be others in Redemption Creek who know the boy was dying before you treated him, people who witnessed his illness progressing." Cordelia considered this. "The general store owner, Mr. Sullivan. He supplied me with some of the medicines I used, and Mrs. Bartlett, the midwife she helped me care for the boy when his fever was at its worst. Would they speak the truth if asked directly? By someone they don't associate with the mayor's influence?" "Possibly," Cordelia admitted. "Mr. Sullivan, certainly. He never believed the accusations against me, but how would we even reach them? I can't go back to town, and you're in no condition to travel." Isaac grimaced in acknowledgement of his injury. "No, but Sarah could carry a message to my friend at the newspaper, asking him to investigate. He's a tenacious man once he starts digging." He won't stop until he finds the truth. It was a risk, Cordelia knew. Drawing attention to her case might bring the hunters straight to them. But continuing to hide, always looking over their shoulder, that was no way to build a life together. It could work, she said slowly, or it could make things worse. Isaac squeezed her hand. Every choice has risks, but I'd rather fight for the truth than spend our lives running from lies. Our lives? The casual way he included her in his future sent warmth spreading through her chest. All right, she agreed. We'll ask Sarah to carry the message when she returns tomorrow. Isaac smiled, then winced as he shifted his injured leg. I suppose this means I won't be building us a new cabin deeper in the mountains anytime soon. This one suits us fine, Cordelia assured him, rising to check his bandages. Besides, I've grown attached to the garden. As she carefully unwrapped the blood-stained cloth from his leg, Isaac watched her with an expression that made her cheeks warm. You know, he said conversationally, in some cultures, when a woman saves a man's life, tradition holds that his life then belongs to her. Cordelia raised an eyebrow as she examined the wound, pleased to see no signs of serious infection yet. Is that so? And what would I do with your life, Mr. Ryder? Whatever you wish, Miss James, he replied, a hint of mischief in his eyes despite the pain he must still be feeling. Though I have a few suggestions once my leg heals. She blushed deeper at his implication but couldn't help smiling. Improper suggestions, I assume? Some proper, some less so, he admitted. Starting with making an honest woman of you if you'll have me. The proposal, casual as it was, still took her breath away. Isaac, are you asking me to marry you? Not very romantically, I'm afraid, he said, suddenly looking uncertain. I should probably wait until I can at least kneel properly. Cordelia shook her head, laughing even as tears sprang to her eyes. No need for kneeling, my answer would be the same either way. And that answer is, he prompted, his expression a mixture of hope and vulnerability that made her heart ache with tenderness. She leaned down to kiss him again, lingering a moment longer this time. Yes, she whispered against his lips. My answer is yes. The joy that bloomed across his face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Then, regardless of what happens with the newspaper or the mayor or any of it, we have something worth fighting for. Cordelia nodded, thinking of all they had already overcome and all that might still lie ahead. We do. True to her words, Sarah returned the next day. She took one look at Isaac's injured leg and Cordelia's exhausted but happy face and smiled knowingly. So, she said, settling herself by the fire as Cordelia explained their plan, you wish me to carry a message to this newspaper man, to tell the truth about the witch who is not a witch. If you're willing, Isaac said, it would mean traveling to Laramie. Sarah considered this. My son can take the message. He trades in Laramie sometimes. The white men there know him. She glanced between them, her dark eyes missing nothing. And while he is gone, what will you two do? Wait, Cordelia said. And hope. And heal, Isaac added, indicating his leg. I won't be going anywhere for a while. Sarah nodded, satisfied. Good. The mountain lion that is not a mountain lion has been seen again near our winter camp. My people would not welcome a witch in their midst, even one who is not truly a witch. Her gaze softened. But they would welcome a healer and her husband once the danger has passed. Cordelia and Isaac exchanged surprised glances. We haven't yet, Cordelia began. But you will, Sarah interrupted confidently. I can see it in your eyes, both of you. She rose, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. I will send my son with your message tomorrow. Until then, keep the door barred and the rifle loaded. The hunters are still searching. After she left, Cordelia turned to Isaac. Is she always so perceptive? He chuckled. Sarah knows things before they happen. It's a gift, she says, or a curse depending on what she sees. And she sees us married, Cordelia mused, sitting beside him on the bed. She sees what I hope for, Isaac said, taking her hand. A future together, whatever form that takes. Cordelia leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling a contentment she had never expected to find, especially not while being hunted as a witch. "Whatever happens with the newspaper and the mayor," she said softly, "I'm glad I ran to your door that day." Isaac pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "So am I. Though I still think it was the bravest foolish thing I've ever seen, you running straight into the wilderness with no plan and no supplies." She laughed. "It wasn't my finest moment of preparation, I admit, but it led me here. To you. To us," he corrected, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. They sat in companionable silence as the sun began to set, painting the cabin in hues of gold and amber. Outside, the world was still fraught with danger and uncertainty. But inside these walls, they had found something precious and unexpected, a second chance at love, born from the very persecution that had threatened to destroy them both. "She was accused of witchcraft," Isaac murmured, almost to himself. "And I said then what I still believe now: if healing is magic, then magic must mean mercy here." Cordelia smiled, remembering those words he had spoken to the posse that first day. "Magic and mercy," she echoed. "I can live with that." "So can I," Isaac agreed, his arms tightening around her. "So can I." As darkness fell, they remained together, two souls who had found each other against all odds, creating their own kind of magic in a world that had tried to condemn them both. 2 weeks passed, the days growing shorter and colder as autumn deepened toward winter. Isaac's leg healed slowly but steadily under Cordelia's care. They settled into a new routine, she tending the garden and preparing for winter, he teaching her to use the rifle and mending tools that needed repair. In the evenings, they would read aloud to each other or simply talk, sharing pieces of their past they had previously kept hidden. There had been no word from Sarah's son about the newspaper, but they tried not to worry. Laramie was several days' journey, and it would take time for any investigation to bear fruit. Then, one crisp morning, as Cordelia was gathering the last of the root vegetables from the garden, she heard the now familiar sound of approaching horses. Quickly, she retreated to the cabin where Isaac was seated at the table, cleaning his rifle. "Ryder's coming," she said, her heart racing as it always did at the prospect of discovery. Isaac nodded, finishing his task with deliberate calm. "How many?" "I couldn't tell, more than one." He rose, testing his weight on his injured leg. It would bear him now, though he still walked with a slight limp. "Stay inside," he instructed, moving to the window to peer out. "It's Sarah and someone else." Cordelia joined him at the window, relief washing through her at the sight of the medicine woman. But Sarah was not alone. Beside her rode a white man Cordelia didn't recognize, tall and lean, with spectacles and a notebook tucked into his coat pocket. "Is that your friend?" she asked Isaac. "The newspaperman," Isaac nodded, a smile breaking across his face. "James Walker. Looks like Sarah's son found him after all." They moved to the door together, Isaac opening it as the riders dismounted in the clearing. Sarah gave them a brief nod of greeting, but it was the stranger who stepped forward first, extending his hand to Isaac. "Ryder," he said warmly, "it's been a long time." Isaac clasped his hand firmly. "Too long, Walker, thank you for coming. When I got your message, how could I resist?" Walker's gaze shifted to Cordelia. "And you must be Miss James, the Witch of Redemption Creek." Cordelia stiffened, but the man's tone held no accusation, only journalistic interest. "I'm a healer, Mr. Walker, not a witch." "So I've begun to discover," he replied, patting his notebook. "May we come in? I have much to discuss with you both." Once inside, Sarah took her usual place by the fire while Walker settled at the table, spreading out several papers he withdrew from a leather satchel. "I've been to Redemption Creek," he began without preamble. "Spoken to several people there, including your Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Bartlett. Both confirmed your account of the mayor's son's illness. The boy was dying before you ever treated him." Hope sparked in Cordelia's chest. "And the mayor," Walker's expression darkened. "Mayor Hoffman refused to speak with me, but his wife did when he was out of the house. She admitted the boy had been sick for weeks before you were called in, so sick that they'd already begun making funeral arrangements." "Then why blame Cordelia?" Isaac demanded. "Why call her a witch?" "Politics," Walker said simply. The mayor is up for re-election next month. His opponent has been criticizing his leadership, especially his decision to bring in an unmarried female healer instead of a proper doctor. When the boy died despite Cordelia's efforts, it was easier to blame witchcraft than admit he had waited too long to seek proper medical help. The cynical calculation of it all made Cordelia's stomach turn. A man had whipped a town into a murderous frenzy, had nearly gotten her killed, all to protect his political career. "I've written the whole story," Walker continued, tapping his notebook. "Every detail, including testimonies from those who know the truth. It will run in tomorrow's edition of the Laramie Chronicle." "And you think that will be enough?" Cordelia asked skeptically. "That people will simply accept the truth and let me return," Walker adjusted his spectacles. "The truth has power, Miss James. Perhaps not immediate power, but lasting power. Once people read the facts, once they have time to consider them away from the influence of men like Mayor Hoffman, many will recognize the injustice of what was done to you." "Many, but not all," Isaac pointed out. "No," Walker conceded, "not all. There will always be those who prefer a comforting lie to an uncomfortable truth, but the law, at least, should be on your side once the full story comes to light." Sarah, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "The newspaper is good, but there is something else you should know." She looked at Cordelia with solemn eyes. "The mayor's boy, he had the same sickness that took 3 children from my tribe last winter, a sickness no medicine, white or Indian, could cure." "A new strain of fever," Cordelia suggested. "I've seen it before. It comes on suddenly, burns hot and often." She trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. "Often kills," Sarah completed for her. "Yes, but 2 days ago the mayor's other son fell ill with the same sickness. My son heard this in Laramie. They say the boy is near death." Isaac and Cordelia exchanged glances, understanding passing between them without words. "If it's the same illness," Cordelia said slowly, "I might be able to help. Not cure it, perhaps, but improve his chances. You would help the family that branded you a witch." Walker asked, clearly intrigued by this development. "I'm a healer, Mr. Walker," she replied simply. "That means I help those in need, regardless of who they are or what they've done." Isaac took her hand, his pride evident in his eyes. "If Cordelia wants to try to save the boy, I'll support her, but I won't let her walk into danger alone." "You won't have to," Walker assured them. "My story runs tomorrow. By the time we reach Redemption Creek, the truth will already be spreading, and I'll be with you, documenting everything. Even Mayor Hoffman wouldn't dare harm you with a newspaper reporter as witness." Sarah nodded her approval. "It is good medicine to help those who have wronged you. It heals more than just the body." The decision made, they spent the remainder of the day making preparations. Walker would ride ahead to Laramie to oversee the printing of his story, while Cordelia and Isaac, accompanied by Sarah, would follow a day later. It would be a difficult journey, especially with Isaac's leg not fully healed, but the urgency of the situation allowed no delay. That night, after their guests had retired to the barn where Isaac had prepared sleeping arrangements, Cordelia and Isaac lay together on the bed, her head resting on his chest as they contemplated the risks ahead. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, stroking her hair. "No one would blame you if you chose to stay hidden, or if we left this territory entirely." Cordelia lifted her head to look at him. "I'm sure, not just because it's a chance to clear my name, but because it's the right thing to do. That boy doesn't deserve to die because his father is a coward." Isaac smiled, though concern still shadowed his eyes. "You're a remarkable woman, Cordelia James. Soon to be Cordelia Ryder," she reminded him, returning his smile. "Is that so?" he teased. "I don't recall setting a date," she kissed him lightly. "The sooner the better, I'd say. Preferably before we ride into a town that recently wanted to hang me as a witch." Isaac's expression grew serious. "I won't let anything happen to you, I promise." "I know," she said, settling back against his chest, "and I promise the same to you. We protect each other now. That's what it means to be together." As sleep claimed them, Cordelia found herself thinking not of the dangers that lay ahead, but of the journey that had brought them to this point, from a desperate woman fleeing for her life to a healer preparing to face her accusers with her head held high, with a man who loved her by her side. Whatever happened in Redemption Creek, they would face it together. And in that certainty, she found a peace she had never known before. The journey to Redemption Creek took 2 days, traveling at a pace that accommodated Isaac's healing leg. They arrived late in the afternoon, the town appearing much as Cordelia remembered it, a single main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a church steeple rising above the rooftops, horses hitched outside the saloon. Yet something felt different, a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. People stopped and stared as they rode in Isaac on his bay gelding, Cordelia riding double behind him, and Sarah on her paint pony. Whispers followed them, and Cordelia felt the weight of 100 eyes as they made their way toward the doctor's office that had stood empty since before her arrival in town. "They've seen the newspaper," Isaac murmured, feeling her tense against his back. Walker's story must have reached them. Indeed, as they passed the general store, Mr. Sullivan emerged, a copy of the Laramie Chronicle clutched in his hand. His face broke into a wide smile at the sight of Cordelia. "Miss James," he called, "thank the Lord you're safe." Others began to gather, some looking ashamed, some curious, a few still hostile. But no one made a move to stop them as they continued toward the mayor's house at the end of the street. Walker was waiting for them on the porch, deep in conversation with a woman Cordelia recognized as the mayor's wife. Upon seeing their approach, Mrs. Hoffman hurried down the steps, her face drawn with worry and lack of sleep. "Miss James," she said, her voice breaking, "I know we have no right to ask, but please help my son. The doctor from Laramie says there's nothing more to be done, but I won't accept that." Cordelia dismounted, her legs stiff from the long ride. "I'll do what I can, Mrs. Hoffman. I promise no miracles, but I'll try." The woman clasped Cordelia's hands, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. After everything, thank you." Isaac limped to Cordelia's side, his protective stance making it clear to everyone watching that they were together. "Where is the mayor?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of challenge. "Inside," Walker answered, descending the porch steps to join them. Refusing to leave his son's bedside, he's not himself. Mrs. Hoffman wiped her tears. "He hasn't slept in 3 days, just sits there holding Tommy's hand, praying." She looked at Cordelia imploringly. "He knows he was wrong about you, about everything, the newspaper story. It broke something in him." Cordelia exchanged a glance with Isaac, who nodded slightly, understanding her unspoken question. "Take me to your son," she said to Mrs. Hoffman, "and bring me clean water as much as you have." Inside the mayor's house, the atmosphere was oppressive, curtains drawn against the light, the air heavy with the scent of sickness. Mrs. Hoffman led them to a bedroom where a small figure lay motionless beneath a mound of blankets. Beside the bed, slumped in a chair, sat Mayor Hoffman, once a robust, commanding presence, now a hollow-eyed shadow. He looked up as they entered, his gaze moving from his wife to Walker, then to Sarah, before finally landing on Cordelia. For a moment, recognition seemed to escape him. Then his eyes widened. "You," he whispered hoarsely. "The witch." But the accusation lacked its former venom, sounding more like a statement of fact than a condemnation. "The healer," Isaac corrected firmly, his hand on the small of Cordelia's back. "She's here to help your son if you'll allow it." Mayor Hoffman stared at them blankly, then at the still form of his child. Something crumbled in his expression, pride, perhaps, or the last of his self-deception. "Please," he said, rising unsteadily from his chair. "Save him. I'll give anything, do anything." Cordelia moved to the bedside, her healer's instincts taking over as she assessed the boy's condition. He was young, perhaps 7 or 8, with the same fair hair his older brother had had. His skin burned with fever, his breathing shallow and labored. "I need my supplies," she said, turning to Mrs. Hoffman. "Herbs, tinctures, most were left in my room above the general store." "They're still there," Mr. Sullivan said from the doorway where he had followed them in, Everything just as you left it, wouldn't let anyone touch a thing. Thank you, Cordelia said, genuinely moved by this small act of faith in her eventual return. Isaac, could you already going? He assured her, pressing a quick kiss to her temple before limping from the room. The open display of affection raised eyebrows among those watching, but Cordelia couldn't bring herself to care about propriety now. There were more important matters at hand. Sarah stepped forward, laying a weathered hand on the boy's forehead. The same sickness, she confirmed. I will help if you permit it. This she directed at Mrs. Hoffman, who nodded gratefully. Anything that might save him, she said, looking to her husband for confirmation. Mayor Hoffman nodded dumbly, moving aside to give the women room to work. As he did, he seemed to notice Isaac for the first time. Ryder, he said, recognition dawning. You sheltered her all this time. Isaac met his gaze steadily. I did. Why? It was a simple question, but one that carried the weight of all that had happened: the hunt, the accusations, the near lynching. Because she was accused of witchcraft, Isaac replied evenly. And I said then what I say now: if healing is magic, then magic must mean mercy here. Mayor Hoffman flinched as if struck. Mercy, he repeated, the word seemingly foreign to him. Is that what you've come to show? Mercy, Cordelia has, Isaac confirmed. I've come to make sure she's safe while she does it. The mayor looked away, unable to hold Isaac's gaze. I understand. For the next several hours, Cordelia and Sarah worked tirelessly. Isaac returned with Cordelia's supplies, and together they prepared treatments: cool compresses infused with herbs to bring down the fever, teas to strengthen the body's fight against infection, poultices to draw out the sickness. It was a blend of Cordelia's medical knowledge and Sarah's traditional wisdom, each woman respecting the other's expertise. Night fell, and still they worked. The mayor and his wife kept vigil alongside them while Walker observed from a corner, occasionally making notes in his journal. Word had spread throughout the town, and many gathered outside the house, waiting for news. Near midnight, the boy's fever finally broke. His breathing eased, and for the first time he opened his eyes, focusing briefly on his mother's face before drifting into a natural, healing sleep. He'll live, Cordelia announced, exhaustion evident in her voice. He needs rest now and nourishment when he wakes, but I believe the worst has passed. Mrs. Hoffman sobbed with relief, gathering Cordelia's hands in hers and pressing them to her lips in gratitude. Even the mayor seemed overcome, tears streaming unchecked down his face. I don't know how to thank you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. After what I did, what I almost caused to happen, you can thank her, Isaac interrupted, by telling the truth to everyone. Not just what the newspaper printed, but your own admission of what really happened. Mayor Hoffman nodded slowly. Yes, of course, I'll make a public statement tomorrow, clear her name completely. He hesitated, then added, though I doubt it will be enough. It won't, Cordelia agreed, speaking directly to him for the first time. But it's a start. Exhausted, she allowed Isaac to lead her from the room. Walker followed, along with Sarah, leaving the family to their relief and reunion. You can stay at the hotel tonight, Walker suggested. On the newspaper's account, you both look dead on your feet. Thank you, Isaac accepted for them both. We'll leave for home in the morning. Home, such a simple word for what they had found together. Cordelia leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence as they made their way through the gathered crowd to the hotel. There were no jeers this time, no accusations of witchcraft. Instead, people stepped aside respectfully, some even offering quiet thanks or apologies. Not all, of course, some still watched with suspicion or turned away entirely. But it was a far cry from the mob that had driven her into the wilderness weeks before. At the hotel, the proprietor gave them adjoining rooms without comment, though his curious gaze lingered on their obvious closeness. Cordelia was too tired to care about appearances. After bidding goodnight to Walker and Sarah, who had her own arrangements with friends on the edge of town, she and Isaac retired to their rooms. Once alone, Cordelia sagged against the closed door, the events of the day finally catching up with her. She had faced her accusers, had walked back into the town that had tried to kill her, and had saved the son of the man who had orchestrated her persecution. It was almost too much to process. A soft knock at the connecting door roused her. She opened it to find Isaac standing there, his expression a mixture of concern and pride. "You were magnificent today," he said simply. Cordelia smiled wearily. "I was just being a healer. It's what I do." "It's more than that," he insisted, taking her hands in his. "You showed them all what true strength looks like, what mercy looks like." He drew her gently into his arms. "I've never been more proud to be the man who loves you." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Take me home tomorrow," she whispered. "Back to our cabin." "As soon as the sun rises," he promised. "Though we'll need to return eventually." Cordelia looked up, puzzled. "Why?" A smile touched his lips. "To get married unless you've changed your mind." "Never," she assured him. "But we could be married by a justice of the peace in Laramie, or by Sarah's people in their way. Or," Isaac suggested, "we could be married here, in the town that once called you witch but will soon call you wife, my wife." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "What better way to reclaim your place, to show them all that you are not defined by their fear, but by your own courage?" Cordelia considered this. There was a certain poetic justice to the idea turning a place of persecution into one of celebration. "We could," she agreed slowly. "After things settle, after people have time to accept the truth." "Spring, then," Isaac proposed. "When the snow melts and the flowers bloom, we'll come back and be married in the church if that's what you want, or under the open sky anywhere you choose." "Spring," she repeated, liking the symbolism of it, a new beginning after the winter of their trials. "Yes, that sounds perfect." He sealed the promise with a kiss, gentle at first, then deepening as the emotion of the day found its release. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I should go," he said reluctantly, glancing toward his own room. "People here are already talking enough without giving them more reason." Cordelia laughed softly. "Let them talk. After being called a witch, mere gossip holds little terror." Isaac grinned, pressing one more kiss to her lips before releasing her. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we ride home, and then we have the rest of our lives," she completed for him. As she prepared for bed in the unfamiliar room, Cordelia found herself reflecting on the strange path that had led her here. From a desperate flight through the forest to saving the mayor's son, from accusations of witchcraft to finding love in the most unexpected place, it had been a journey she could never have imagined. Yet she wouldn't change a moment of it, for all the pain and fear had led her to Isaac, to their cabin in the mountains, to a future bright with possibilities she had once thought forever beyond her reach. She fell asleep with a smile on her lips, dreaming not of persecution but of promises kept, of spring weddings and mountain cabins, of a life built on truth and trust with the man who had seen beyond the accusations to the healer and the woman beneath. Spring came, as it always does, transforming the Wyoming wilderness from a stark landscape of white and gray to a riot of green and color. The mountains shed their snowy mantles, streams swelled with meltwater, and wildflowers carpeted the clearings around Isaac and Cordelia's cabin. The months since their dramatic return to Redemption Creek had passed in peaceful industry. They had weathered the winter together, expanding the cabin to include a proper surgery where Cordelia could treat the occasional trapper or hunter who came seeking medical help. Word had spread of the healer in the mountains who worked with both white medicine and the traditional knowledge of the native tribes, and gradually, a trickle of patients had begun to make the journey to their door. Isaac had added a stable to house not only his horse, but the fine mare Walker had sent as a wedding gift, along with a note saying the story of the Witch of Redemption Creek had been picked up by newspapers as far east as Chicago. Mayor Hoffman had lost his re-election bid, but had made good on his promise to publicly clear Cordelia's name. His son had made a full recovery, and Mrs. Hoffman had personally visited the cabin to express her enduring gratitude. Sarah and her people had wintered nearby, and Cordelia had spent many days learning from the older woman, exchanging knowledge of healing practices. In return, Isaac had taught Sarah's son improved hunting techniques and helped repair their lodges after a particularly fierce blizzard. And now, on this bright May morning, Cordelia stood before the small mirror in their cabin, adjusting the simple white dress she had sewn for this special occasion. They were returning to Redemption Creek today not in secrecy or defiance, but in celebration. They were to be married in the town square, under the open sky, with Sarah's people and the townsfolk in attendance. It was a bridge between worlds that few would have thought possible months ago, the accused witch and the mountain hermit, bringing together two communities that had long viewed each other with suspicion. "Are you ready?" Isaac asked, appearing in the doorway. He looked handsome in his new shirt and vest, his hair neatly trimmed, though he had refused to completely shave his beard despite Cordelia's teasing. "Almost," she replied, securing a sprig of lavender, the same herb she had carried in her apron pocket the day she fled into her hair. "There. Now I'm ready." Isaac crossed the room to stand behind her, their reflections side by side in the mirror. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice low with emotion. "And not just today." Cordelia turned to face him, smoothing the front of his vest. "You're not so bad yourself, Mr. Ryder." "Soon to be your Mr. Ryder," he reminded her, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "If you're still certain about this." "More certain than I've ever been about anything," she assured him. "Are you having doubts?" He shook his head, smiling. "Not a one. Though I still find it hard to believe that running to my door that day would lead to this. The best things in life often come from the most unexpected beginnings," Cordelia mused. "Even accusations of witchcraft." Isaac laughed, the sound filling the cabin with warmth. "Even those. Though I'd prefer if our future holds fewer lynch mobs and more peaceful evenings by the fire." "I think that can be arranged," she promised, rising on tiptoe to kiss him lightly. "Now we should go. Sarah said she'd meet us at the fork in the trail." They rode side by side down the mountain, Cordelia on her mare and Isaac on his gelding, the spring sun warming their backs. As promised, Sarah waited at the fork, dressed in her finest clothes, her long silver-streaked hair adorned with beads and feathers. "The medicine woman and the soldier," she greeted them, using the names she had given them in her own language. "Today you join your paths as one. Thank you for being here, Sarah," Cordelia said warmly, "and for everything you've taught me." The older woman inclined her head. "Knowledge is meant to be shared, not hoarded. You have taught me as well." She turned her horse, indicating they should follow. "Come, the people are waiting." As they approached Redemption Creek, Cordelia felt a momentary tightness in her chest, an echo of the fear she had felt the last time she rode into town. Isaac, sensing her tension, reached across to take her hand. "Remember," he said softly, "you come now not as a fugitive, but as a bride." "Head high, Cordelia," she nodded, straightening her shoulders. "Head high," she agreed. The transformation of the town square took her breath away. Garlands of spring flowers hung from every post and rail. Benches had been arranged in a semicircle, already filling with townsfolk in their Sunday best. A simple arch woven with wildflowers stood at the center, where Preacher Milton, the same man who had once called for her capture, waited to perform the ceremony. As they dismounted at the edge of the square, a small figure broke away from the crowd and ran toward them. Tommy Hoffman, the mayor's son whom Cordelia had saved. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers which he thrust into Cordelia's hands. "Ma said to give you these," he said shyly. "And to say thank you again." Cordelia knelt to accept the flowers, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Tommy. I'm glad to see you looking so well." The boy nodded earnestly. "Pa says you're not a witch at all, you're an angel." Isaac chuckled at this, ruffling the boy's hair. "Close enough, I'd say." More townspeople approached then, offering congratulations and welcomes. Mr. Sullivan was there, beaming with pride as if he had personally arranged the match. Mrs. Bartlett, the midwife, embraced Cordelia warmly. Even Sheriff Holloway, who had once led the posse to Isaac's door, came forward to shake their hands. "Never thought I'd see the day," he admitted gruffly. "Ryder taking a wife. The mountains must be freezing over," Isaac grinned, "or thawing out depending on how you look at it." Walker appeared, looking more the city gentleman than the frontier newsman in his tailored suit. "The happy couple," he greeted them, "and Sarah, a gathering of heroes if ever I saw one." "Hardly heroes," Cordelia demurred, "just people who tried to do what was right." "The very definition of heroism, I'd say," Walker countered, offering his arm to escort her to the arch. "May I have the honor, since your father isn't here to give you away?" Cordelia accepted gratefully, while Isaac took his place beside the preacher. Sarah and her son stood to one side, representing her adopted family, while the townsfolk filled the benches and spilled beyond them, a sea of faces both familiar and strange. As Walker led her toward Isaac, Cordelia realized that this moment represented something far greater than just their marriage. It was a healing for the town, for Isaac's wounded past, for her own fears and doubts. It was proof that even in a place where suspicion and superstition had once ruled, understanding and acceptance could eventually take root. The ceremony itself was simple but profound. Preacher Milton spoke of forgiveness and new beginnings, of the mysterious ways in which God brought souls together. Isaac and Cordelia exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to stand by each other through whatever life might bring, to honor each other's gifts and knowledge, to build a home founded on truth and trust. When Isaac placed the ring on her finger, a band of silver set with a small green stone he had saved for years, Cordelia felt tears of joy spill down her cheeks. This man, who had once been as isolated as she, had opened his heart and his home to her when she needed it most. And in doing so had found his own healing. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Preacher Milton declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Isaac cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. The assembled crowd erupted in cheers and applause, none louder than Sarah and her people, who added traditional songs of blessing to the celebration. The rest of the day passed in a blur of well-wishes and festivities. The town had prepared a feast, spread out on tables beneath the cottonwood trees. There was music and dancing, children running and playing, former enemies breaking bread together. Cordelia found herself welcomed not as an outsider or a curiosity, but as a neighbor and friend. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Isaac found her at the edge of the celebration, watching Sarah teach some of the town's children a traditional dance. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Ryder?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. Cordelia leaned into him, savoring the sound of her new name. "More than ready, though this has been a wonderful day." "Better than I imagined," he agreed. "Seeing you so happy, so accepted, it's more than I dared hope for when I pulled you into my cabin that day." She turned in his arms to face him. "Did you know then that this was where we'd end up?" Isaac shook his head, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "Not consciously, but something in me recognized something in you even then. A kindred spirit, perhaps." "Or a second chance," Cordelia suggested, "for both of us." "That too," he agreed, bending to kiss her softly. Ready for the next chapter, hand in hand, they made their farewells and mounted their horses for the ride back to the mountains. The trail looked different now in the glow of sunset, familiar but somehow new. Just as they were still themselves, but also changed stronger together than they had ever been apart. As they reached the fork where they had met Sarah that morning, Cordelia paused, looking back at the town in the valley below, then up at the forested slopes where their cabin waited. "What is it?" Isaac asked, noticing her hesitation. "Just thinking about how far we've come," she replied. "From witch and hermit to husband and wife, from fear to this." She gestured at the beauty surrounding them. It seems almost like magic, doesn't it? Isaac's smile held all the warmth of the setting sun. Then magic must mean mercy here, he said, echoing the words that had first opened his door and his heart to her. And love, and home. And home, Cordelia agreed, turning her horse toward the cabin that awaited them. Together, they rode into the gathering dusk, leaving behind the accusations and fears that had once defined them. Ahead lay a life built on healing and trust, on shared knowledge and mutual respect, a life neither could have imagined before fate brought them together on that desperate dawn, when a woman accused of witchcraft found refuge with a cowboy who believed that magic could mean mercy. And in the years to come, as their cabin expanded to include a proper clinic where Cordelia treated all who sought her help, as Isaac's nightmares faded and his laughter became a common sound, as they welcomed a daughter who inherited her mother's gift for healing and her father's quiet strength, they would often look back on that fateful day and marvel at the journey it had begun. For in a land where suspicion could turn to acceptance, where persecution could transform to celebration, perhaps there was a kind of magic after all the everyday magic of love overcoming fear, of truth defeating lies, of two souls finding in each other exactly what they needed to become whole.